I'm Professor David John Francis, the former Chief Minister and the former Foreign Minister of the Government of the Republic of Sierra Leone. I am currently here as the Executive Board Chairman of the Global Black Center. I've been a friend of Ethiopia for a very long time. I've had the opportunity of coming frequently to Addis Ababa and traveling across Ethiopia for nearly 2 decades now. I've worked with the prime ministers of Ethiopia, foreign ministers of Ethiopia, but I also have former students who are now doctoral students, PhD holders at universities in Ethiopia. So I'm a very good friend of Ethiopia. But in Addis specifically, I was here in February of this year, and I'm back in August. And the one shocking positive transformation is the transformation of the city itself. It's unbelievable. In the night, they took me out to drive for dinner, and I actually thought I was in Shanghai because of the neon lights, beautiful neon lights, or in Brussels or London or New York. Huge, fantastic, positive transformation of the city. Addis Ababa is truly the proud capital of Africa. Well, that is a historical fact and an archaeological fact. And in fact, the recent documentary done by the Sudanese British BBC journalist, Madam Zainab Badawi, African History by African, has clearly shown that Ethiopia is the origin of humanity. So what that simply means that it means that Ethiopia is the center of Pan-Africanism for 2 reasons. Firstly, let me talk about Adwa. Adwa, the historic victory of Adwa on the 1st of March, 1896, against Italian colonialism, a battle that lasted for 1 day, I understand between 6 to 7 hours. It's not just victory for Ethiopia. Adwa is victory for the rest of Africa. Adwa is a symbol of African freedom. It's a symbol of African resistance to colonialism and external aggression against the continent of Africa. Adwa is a very powerful symbol of resistance to all external forces. And importantly, because of the victory of Adwa, and I'm sure you know the history of Adwa, how all the other kings mobilized, ordinary men and women mobilized for 5 months in Addis until the Battle of Adwa itself, the site of the Battle of Adwa. They all united under the King of Kings, Emperor Menelik II. That actually shows that we can achieve unity in diversity. So Adwa is not just about Ethiopia. It's a symbol of African unity, symbol of African freedom. But importantly, it's a symbol of Black pride, heritage, freedom, and resistance globally. That the Adwa victory serves as a very powerful symbol of encouragement and empowerment for the post-colonial and post-colonial leaders, especially those countries that were fighting for liberation, self-determination, and sovereignty. In Kenya, President Kenyatta said Adwa was a symbol of hope and empowerment. In South Africa, President Mandela said Adwa was a symbol of hope and resistance. And the former British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, acknowledged the fact that at the height, when European colonialism was dominant, in particular in the late 19th century, the British, the French, the Belgians, the Ethiopians or Abyssinia set a brilliant example. And according to Winston Churchill, humiliating defeat of the Italians. And he said, a humbling of European colonialism. So that is the symbol, that is the very powerful symbol of Adwa to Africa and Black heritage. Why is it so? And what is the link between the Global Black Heritage History Education Center and that of Adwa victory and the symbolism of it? But as you know, the Global Black Center was established a year ago, and I'm very pleased that you participated in the formal launch. And it was established under the leadership of His Excellency Meke Mekonene, the former Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. It is about two things. Firstly, it is about promoting the history, the culture, the heritage of Africans and people of African descent. Secondly, it is also about promoting the history, the culture, the heritage of Black people globally. So the Global Black History Center is about three things. Firstly, it's about history. We want to promote a new understanding and perspective of African history from a revisionist perspective, a history owned by Africans, so that we can tell our own story in our own words, from our own worldviews, in our own language, from our own perspectives, owned by us. That is the first thing. The second aspect is our heritage. For far too long, we have not promoted the African and Black heritage globally. So we want to use this opportunity to promote our heritage. Adwa is a huge Pan-African heritage. So we want to take Adwa to a global scale, that of the Global Black Heritage. And as I said, Adwa is a symbol of Black resistance, symbol of Black freedom, symbol of Black independence. The third aspect of the Global Black History Center is that with this new understanding of history and our heritage and our artifacts and cultural values, we want to educate the current and future generations of Africans so that they will know the values of Africa. They will know the history of Africa developed by Africans. And of course, UNESCO has done a very good work in developing the general history of Africa. So what we want to do, we want to promote our history, our heritage, and educate the current and future generations so that they emerge as global citizens. So it doesn't matter whether you're an African or Black citizen anywhere in the world, you are a global citizen that shares the Pan-African values of freedom, of unity, of resistance, and common solidarity, believing in a new Africa that will eventually promote the Pan-African ideals. And as you know, Ethiopia has been in the forefront of promoting Pan-African ideals, and that's influenced the creation of the Organization of African Unity, now African Union. And that is why we have today the headquarters. First and foremost, we have focused on the establishment of this organization. And I'm very pleased to inform you confidently that we have completed the official registration of the Global Black History Heritage Education Center here in Addis with all the government agencies. That is one. So the legal, organizational parameters of the center have been fully finalized. That's one. Secondly, we have developed very strong partnership with the key government of Ethiopian ministries and agencies, including the Ministry of Culture, the Ministry of Tourism, but also the municipality of Addis Ababa itself. That's the second. The third aspect is now we are on the verge of operationalizing the secretariat so that we have an address, a base, the headquarters, an operational base where all the activities of the Global Black History Center will be the center of gravity. And we are looking to be operational very soon at the Adwa Victory Memorial Museum Secretariat, because we cannot move away from Adwa. We have to be part of that heritage. The fifth aspect is that we have started programmatic activities. The programmatic activities involve the celebration of the first anniversary of the establishment of the Global Black History Center. And we look to, on the margins of the African Union Summit in February of next year, and the Adwa celebration, we want to organize our first anniversary event. And during that event, we want to also provide awards around Black history, looking at an award for peace and leadership on the global stage, on the global scale, an award for human capital development and educational innovation in Africa, an award for promoting Black heritage across the globe. So these are some of the issues that we have been. But also, finally, we have decided to establish chapters across the globe. But of course, as you know, the Global Black History Center is Addis-based. And we are very pleased that the federal government of the Democratic Republic of Ethiopia is very supportive of this initiative. So I want to use this opportunity to thank His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, for his unflinching support for this initiative. We are looking to establish chapters in the United States, and that will be fronted by and led by one of our patrons, the son of the legendary and iconic Marcus Garvey. His son, Dr. Julius Garvey, is a council member and a patron of the Global Black History. So he will be leading on the establishment of a chapter in the United States, but also given the heritage, the Marcus Garvey heritage, we want to establish a chapter in Jamaica to cover the Latin American and Caribbean regions, but also, apart from Ethiopia, we want to look to establishing chapters in other parts of Africa. In particular, our interest is to establish chapters in all the 54 member states across the continent, including Ethiopia. The idea of establishing centers in America, in Latin America, is really to cater for the African diaspora, the Black diaspora that we have. So I did mention, for example, establishing the chapter in the United States, but we also look to establishing a chapter in United Kingdom, where we have a huge Black diaspora, an African diaspora as well. We have no doubt that we can tap into the opportunities of the global Black presence in the United States, in the Western Hemisphere, Asia, Latin America, to leverage it for the development of what we want to do. The federal government of the Democratic Republic of Ethiopia has already started that process. And we in the Global Black History Center, we are very proud of the leadership of Prime Minister Abiy in making sure that the Ethiopian government is able to facilitate the return of the historical artifacts that were looted by the Italians during their attempt at colonial domination. For example, the plane. The plane is iconic. When I saw the return of that plane and visiting the Adwa Victory, I couldn't resist to take a picture in front of it, because that represents the possibilities for African governments and African peoples to be able to return and secure their heritage in their own homeland. To see that plane that has been developed by Ethiopians with German expertise, a plane, I understand, with 7 engines and 60 horsepower, developed by Ethiopians, that tells you about African technology and innovation. So we are going to use the Global Black Heritage and History Center to leverage and encourage other like-minded organizations and African governments to make a claim for the return of their legitimate historical artifacts. And there are other countries that are already making the progress, so we will work with them, we will support them. What we want to do is to build a global black mobilizational force for the return of African heritage back to Africa. Specifically in the Global Black History Center, is to use, for example, the new publication of the BBC journalist, The General History of Africa, to transform that into a basic textbook for secondary schools, so that that basic textbook for secondary schools on African history will be mainstream into all the curricula of the Ministry of Education across Africa. You'll be surprised to hear that those of us who were educated in Africa and went to universities in Africa, we had the misfortune of learning more about European history, Greek culture, and Roman history than African history. Probably the only history that I knew about of Africa was more about the empires in West Africa and that of Emperor Menelik II and Adwa victory. So predominantly, our history that has been taught at universities and at schools are Eurocentric histories. So what we want to do is to really begin to change that narrative. And as I said at the beginning, we want to train and educate the current and future generations. So by using that textbook on the general history of Africa that has already been done, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So we will work with the BBC, we will work with UNESCO to be able to make sure that we produce basic textbook out of it, so that when we apply it in the education system of Ethiopia, Ethiopian students will learn about general history. But that is not difficult to do. I support the idea because it's about creating an African identity. But having said that, though, it will be difficult to generalize it across Africa, because Africa is a heterogeneous continent, very diverse. There has been attempts, for example, in the African Union to consolidate the languages of the African Union to include that of Swahili. Swahili is predominant in East Africa and some parts of the Horn of Africa, but not so much in North Africa and in West Africa. Arabic is predominant in the north, but not so much as Southern Africa. So we may have challenges, but the initiative started by the Ethiopian government in terms of its history, Abyssinia or Ethiopia has unique history that we have to learn from. It is really about promoting Africa, what is good about Africa. So what you are referring to is a very powerful symbol of Africans promoting what is good on the continent. Because for far too long, Afro-pessimists have always presented Africa as a caricature. In fact, I think it was the London-based economics news magazine in 2000 said, the hopeless continent. Can you believe that, a hopeless continent? No, Africa is never a hopeless continent. But of course, they made amends. 10 years later, the same London-based economics magazine wrote again on the front cover, Africa Rising. So what do you believe? Hopeless continent or Africa Rising? So that shows that we as Africans have to have the knowledge, the capacity, the intellectual gravitas to be able to tell our own stories in our own words, from our own worldview, on our own terms. But I think that is what the Ethiopian government is trying to do. And that's why Ethiopia is highly respected across the globe. The message is very simple. Now is the time for Africans and people of African heritage and blacks globally to promote freedom, justice, independence that is emerging from the African continent through the framework of the global black history that is based in Addis Ababa. And we can draw from the inspiration of the Adwa victory that with this mission, we will be successful. So I call on all blacks globally to support this noble initiative. I thank you very much.